Okay, like last time, I'd like you to open up your chat window and just type your name here so I have a record of who's joined us so I can keep track of that. So first of all, who today is going to tell me something good that's going on? Somebody give me something good here. Come on, don't be shy. Somebody give me something.
My dad has been home for the past 2 days, which has been really cool.
So you're glad to have your dad home?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Is this format working out for you guys okay? Does anybody have a problem with it? Okay, then I don't hear any problems. I haven't gotten any emails. So I'm just going to continue on B days to have this class at 10 a.m. Okay, anybody else that's joined? It looks like everybody has replied to the chat, but if you didn't, then make sure you just put in your name in here so I get a record of who's here. Okay, now I didn't, I told you you don't have more work to do. One of the, there's two videos I want to show you today. One of them is 10 minutes long. And so instead of showing it to you here, which I would have done if we were in a classroom, I added that as an assignment. So you just need to watch the video and then just answer a couple quick questions to know so I know you watched the video. And then the other video is just a short video about 1 or 2 minutes. And I'm going to see if I can play that. I was experimenting with my daughter and wasn't having a lot of success. We'll see if we can make that work today. Okay. Oops. So we're continuing with chapter 10 on motivation. Hunger is another kind of motivation, but hunger is really a complicated sense of motivation. It's not just if your stomach is full. There's a lot of people thought, well, it's just my stomach is full, so I'll drink a lot of water and then I'll be full and I won't have to eat. And they found out that doesn't work so well. So there are receptors in your stomach that tell if it's full, and that's part of the process. But there's a lot of other things that add to that. Some of the things that make us hungry are environmental cues. When we were on a regular schedule, when it gets to be lunchtime, whether you have first lunch or second lunch, like 11:15 or whatever it was, just the time itself could kind of send cues to you that you're hungry. When you see something like a sign for food or you see a hamburger, there's those kind of things that can make you salivate and increase your hunger. And then, of course, your stomach muscles, whether they're full, that's sending messages. Your pancreas releases insulin, and so that extracts the glucose from your blood. So normal insulin levels are going to be associated with increased hunger. And of course, people with diabetes then don't have normal insulin levels, and that creates problems. When your blood glucose is low, it's sending messages to your brain. You have fat cells, and so you have hormones that are produced in your body that's saying, okay, our fat cells are okay, or our fat cell reserves are getting low, and so that sends levels. So there's both internal and external things that cause us to be hungry. Now, one of the things that affects our ability to eat or wanting to eat is parts of the hypothalamus. And one thing we talk about is satiation. When you're sated, that means that you are completely full or your desire is completely fulfilled. Okay, so they did some studies with rats, and they destroyed a part of the hypothalamus. They destroyed the ventral medial hypothalamus. And when they did that, then the rat didn't get that signal to be satiated. And so it kept eating. They got a very fat rat. And another rat, they destroyed the lateral hypothalamus. And when they did that, then that rat didn't have the hunger signals. And so it never ate. And that rat would have starved to death if they didn't force feed it. And so damage to the hypothalamus can affect our hunger. There was a news story about a year ago about a girl who had normal body weight, but then she was in an accident and injured her brain. And after that, she didn't get that feeling of satiation. So she was always hungry and always eating and began to get overweight. So then they were talking about doing some brain surgery to help out with that. So our brain plays an important part of that, and damage to the brain can affect whether we're driven or motivated to eat more or not eat. There's also psychosocial factors. Okay, the visual cues we have, the culture that we grow up in, our conditioning. Obesity is more common in the Pima Indians that live in the US than it is for those that live in Mexico with a more traditional diet. Those psychosocial factors, you're driving around, you see a Taco Bell sign, that might make you hungry. You're at a restaurant, you're full, but then they bring out the dessert tray, and all of a sudden you're feeling hungry. So these different kinds of things can affect hunger. Obesity results from a lot of factors. Some can be those biological factors, the genes and that kind of thing. It can also be from psychosocial factors. Our culture plays a big part of how we are motivated to eat or not eat. We live in a culture that prefers thinness, and it has a prejudice against people who are overweight. Yet, over half of the adults in the US are obese as a result of overeating and not exercising enough. And so because of cultural factors, we end up with two eating disorders, anorexia nervosa and bulimia. Okay, now I'm going to try to share this video with you. And so when I share this, if you're not seeing it, you need to let me know. Okay, so we'll see if this works now or not. Okay, tell me if you've seen a screen come up. Somebody just tell me if you've seen a screen come up. Yes or no?
I don't see one.
You don't see one?
No.
Okay, did you see a video start playing?
No.
No. Okay, then. Okay, so then that's not going to work out then. Okay. On the Teams, when you go to Teams, there's a tab that says Files, and then there's under the tab that says Files, there's one that says Class Materials, and there's a Word document in there that has a link to this video. So I want you to watch the link to that video. Basically, it shows a model that comes in and they do her all up, and then they use Photoshop and do a lot of things to her image, and then put that up on a big billboard so we can see why that happens. There's also a link there to a video for another Dove video that shows people being sketched by how they see themselves, and then people being sketched by how other people see them, and then see a difference between how people are seeing themselves and how others are seeing them. And so this is a big part of how the culture plays into that. There's also links to those two videos on my website under the psychology page. So the one video is only about 1 or 2 minutes. Check that out. The other videos, I think about 5 minutes, give or take. So hopefully you'll check both of those out. All right, so anorexia is an eating disorder. Okay, it's characterized by a severe loss of weight resulting from self-imposed starvation and an obsessive fear of obesity. And some people that continue to suffer from anorexia will eventually die from anorexia. So some of the symptoms are a body weight that's below 85% of normal. They have an intense fear of becoming fat or gaining weight, even though they're underweight. They have a disturbance in their body image. So you might be seeing a thin person, but they're looking at themselves in the mirror and seeing somebody who's overweight. Their self-evaluation is unduly influenced by body weight, that they think of themselves, okay, that they're not a good person if they're putting on any kind of extra weight. They deny the seriousness of their abnormally low body weight. They might experience absence of menstrual periods. They may engage in purging behaviors like vomiting or the misuse of laxatives or diuretics. And all of these things can lead to emaciation, osteoporosis, bone fractures, the interruption of the menstruation, loss of brain tissue, or ultimately even death. Now, you can't necessarily tell that somebody's anorexic just by looking at them. There are people that genetically they're just thin and they eat normally or eat more than most people, but genetically they're just thin. And there's others who might appear to be normal, but they do suffer from anorexia. One of the ways that is kind of a symptom is if you eat with somebody who's anorexic, they may push their food around on the plate to make it look like they've eaten, but they really haven't eaten anything. Or they might eat some and then immediately go off to the bathroom to try to purge themselves or use some kind of laxatives to get the food out of their system. Another eating disorder is bulimia. With bulimia, people engage in binge eating and then purging. So there's this binging, purging behavior. So typically people with bulimia either have a normal body weight or above normal body weight. At times they go into binge eating and just eat more than is normal. They eat large quantities of food. That's binging. And then they follow that at some point by purging behavior. So they might try extreme exercising, or they might try laxatives, or they might just try sticking their finger in their throat and throwing up the food. They feel like they have a lack of control over their eating. And so they try to, and so they have the times when they binge and then they try to get rid of that. And so again, their self-evaluation is unduly influenced by their body weight. Sometimes they engage in other behaviors like excessive shopping or alcohol abuse or petty shoplifting. The vomiting that comes from this purging behavior can lead to dental damage because you're throwing up all that acid repeatedly, severe damage to the throat and stomach, cardiac arrhythmias, metabolic deficiencies, or other serious digestive disorders. I had a student once who suffered from anorexia, and she was getting treatment, and she had actually been arrested shoplifting. And I asked her about that. So why did you feel the need to shoplift? She said, because you're all the time so consumed or so obsessed with this thought about not having to eat, that those kind of things like shoplifting gives you that arousal that kind of takes you away from that obsessive thoughts for a while. For her, she was arrested when she got caught shoplifting, and she was fortunate that the arresting officer had a niece that also suffered from anorexia, and so he noticed the symptoms. So instead of taking her off to jail, he took her to her mom and said, look, your daughter's got a problem and she needs to get help. And so she got the help that she needed. All right, there's different theories about why people suffer from eating disorders. One is those physical things. We talked about damage to the hypothalamus, or that other neurotransmitters in the body aren't working well. So there's those physical problems. There's the psychosocial problems. They feel a need for perfection. So something's happened that they feel they need to be perfect, and that is part of it. Some people feel something has happened to them in their life and they've lost control. And so this is a way that they can demonstrate control in their life by controlling their eating behavior. They may have been teased when they were younger about their body weight or their image, and that led them to having this disorder. They may suffer from some kind of depression, other body image. There may have been dysfunctional family issues going on, or they may have suffered from some kind of sexual abuse in the past. There's also cultural reasons. Okay, we talked about how our society puts out these magazines and they Photoshop, even the celebrities, they Photoshop them to put their images on the magazine. So there's these perceptions about what young people should look like. And we develop these stereotypes about eating behaviors. So all these things can go into creating these eating disorders. So before I go on, does anyone have any questions about any of that? Okay, so we need to understand, what's a healthy body image, and of course we need to understand healthy eating habits and exercise. We realize when we get older, our metabolism slows down, and so we can change our habits. Personally, I'm overweight now, but I was way overweight, and then the doctor said, okay, now your blood sugars are so high, you have diabetes now, and if you don't change, then you're going to be looking at a lot of other serious things. And so at that time, I was drinking soda every day. I just drank soda all day, every day. So at that point, I stopped drinking soda. I stopped drinking alcohol. I started walking every day. I started really looking at not eating things with a lot of sugar in them. So I made some changes, and in a year's time, I lost 40 pounds. So, we can make changes, and it has to do with both eating and exercising. All right, another motivation is something called a high need for achievement. And here's something that probably many of you can relate to. Okay, we have this high need for achievement, which we kind of use this acronym NACH, a need for achievement. And so some of the characteristics are a preference for moderately difficult tasks. Tasks that are too easy offer little challenge, and so they're not satisfying. But people with a high need for achievement tend to avoid extremely difficult tasks because the probability for success is low. There's a certain competitiveness that if somebody has, maybe this grade, then they're going to try to outdo them and do better. If somebody does one thing well, they're going to try to do better. So they have a certain feeling of competitiveness, that they want to do better than others. They have a preference for clear goals with competent feedback. So when they do something and maybe they don't get the grade they want the teacher or whoever to give them some kind of constructive criticism, some feedback that's very clear, and then they can improve. They also tend to take personal responsibilities. So if they're in a group, if they have a group project, they tend to take responsibility for that because they don't want their grade based on what other people have done. They want to be the one that earns that grade, and they feel personally responsible for that. So they tend to take that kind of responsibility. And people with a high need for achievement tend to be persistent. Even if they're working on something, even when the task starts to become difficult, they will persist. So that achievement orientation appears to be largely learned in early childhood. Okay, the highly motivated children tend to have parents who encourage their independence and frequently rewarded them for their success. And so people with a high need for achievement tend to be more accomplished. Okay, who can tell me how anorexia is different from bulimia? And if you're piping in, remember to unmute your microphone. How is anorexia different from bulimia?
I think anorexia is like a condition that happens all the time, where like someone will eat and do or throw up or bulimia is like binge eating a whole bunch more than normal, and then vomiting right after that.
Okay, close. Anorexia is usually not eating, and so they do everything they can to avoid eating. And then bulimia is the binging and purging. So yes. Okay, and then I just gave you the characteristics for the high need for achievement. Okay, sexuality has things to do with motivation. Our sexual behavior has to do with both our needs and reproduction for the species. So there's a strong motivation to engage in sexual behavior. Okay, besides that purpose to reproduce, to provide the survival of the species, it's also something that's pleasurable. And it's a way for human beings to connect with each other and provide some kind of intimacy. All right, so we have sexual orientation. So that's the primary erotic attraction towards members of either the same sex or both sexes or the other sex. And from that, we have sexual prejudice. So these are negative attitudes towards an individual because of his or her sexual orientation. So there's a lot of sexual prejudice out there. Now, one thing we need to understand is that people do not decide on their sexual orientation. You did not wake up one day and say, do I want to be homosexual or do I want to be heterosexual? It's not something you made a decision on. It's something that you have become, and we don't fully understand why that is, whether it's genetic or whether it's something that has happened in parental relationships early in the child's life, or if there's some other factor. So we don't know why a person's sexual orientation develops at this point. But we do know it's something that happens early on, and it's not something a person chooses. All right, another kind of motivation are intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is based on obvious external rewards or threats of punishment. So we dealt with a chapter on rewards and punishments. So that's extrinsic motivation. If I'm giving you a reward to do something, or I'm threatening you with some kind of punishment, then you're motivated to do something or to stay away from something. Intrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is a motivation that results from the personal enjoyment of a task or an activity. For instance, somebody plays the guitar because they enjoy playing the guitar, not because they think they're going to get some kind of reward for it. Now, we looked in a chapter about how we can influence people's behavior by providing rewards, but psychologists are concerned that providing extrinsic motivation, like paying for grades, might seriously affect the person's personal intrinsic motivation. When we look at football players, I mean, they're getting paid to play a game, but why are so many football players unhappy? When we look at certain studies on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, sometimes those extrinsic rewards may lower intrinsic motivation. Now, sometimes people don't have an intrinsic motivation to do something, and so a reward gets them to do it. But for instance, there's a study that looked at the amount of time that children spent drawing. If there was no reward, just said, okay, now you can use this time drawing or doing whatever, then kids spend a lot of time drawing. If after their drawing they got some kind of reward, the amount of time they spent went down a little bit. If before the time, if they said, okay, I'm going to give you a certificate for drawing, the amount of time the kids spent drawing went way down. So that promise of a reward reduced their intrinsic motivation. No longer was it, okay, here's the way I express myself, I can do what I want. Now it was, now you expect something of me. And it was no longer fun, so they didn't spend that amount of time doing it. All right, so intrinsic motivation is some kind of controlling motivation. Okay, not all extrinsic motivation is bad. Intrinsic motivation can be good. They can be rewarding if we're used to inform somebody of some kind of superior performance or some kind of special treat where there's no strings attached. Okay, so that might intensify their desire to do well. Okay, getting a raise or getting a gold medal can give us some valuable feedback about our performance, and so that might increase our enjoyment. But if the rewards are used to control our behavior, such as if parents pay for good grades, then that might inhibit our intrinsic motivation. So when we look at this slide, we have controlling behavior. So the school might pay for some small reward for attendance. So there's a student that might say, okay, I usually don't attend, but hey, if you promise me a little reward, okay, then maybe I'll go and attend school more often. So that's getting them to come. So that's a good thing. Intrinsic motivation is a student who enjoys going to school. Okay, I enjoy doing it. You don't need to give me a reward, but at the end of the year, the school gives them a little certificate for outstanding attendance. So then they might say, cool, man, I enjoy going to school. And look, I got a little certificate. With extrinsic motivation, somebody may not be doing well in school. The parents say, well, I want you to get A's like the neighbor kid. And so the kid feels bad that their parents are admiring the neighbor, so maybe they'll do good to get their approval. So they weren't intrinsically motivated to do good, but with a little external pressure, then they do better in school. On the other hand, there are students, like I'm sure most of you, who like getting good grades. Okay, you're motivated for whatever reason to get good grades. Maybe you're motivated to go to college. Maybe you just feel good about yourself. Maybe you're smart and you like to show that. Whatever reason, you like getting good grades. And so you get good grades, and then at the end of the school year, your parents haven't promised you anything beforehand. But after you get the good grades, maybe they say, wow, that's a great report card. Let's go get a special treat. And so that's just like an added reward that adds to the satisfaction. Okay, now, usually at this point, I would play a certain video. Okay. We have to understand the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and how we can use that in our homes, with our family, in a work environment, in a school environment, how we can use that, number one, to increase people's enjoyment for things and to get them to persist, but also in other cases, just to control or have people do things that's for their better. So this video, I've put it as an assignment in the Teams. I also have a link to it on my website. So I want you to watch the video and then answer a couple of questions. Now, one of the things I typically ask on a test is how to use intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So, for example, if you have a child who enjoys soccer, okay, if you say, okay, I'm going to pay you to do soccer, well, now they're not going to enjoy that anymore because there's a certain expectation. But you can help them with their intrinsic motivation. So if they enjoy soccer, then you can buy them a soccer ball. You can enroll them on a soccer team so they can play soccer. So there's things you can do to encourage that interest. Okay, you're not rewarding them, you're not promising them something, but you're just helping them with that intrinsic motivation. Sometimes a child needs a little extrinsic motivation. With my oldest daughter, she liked to read. We go to the library, she would check out 5 books out of the library. This is before we had things online, okay? We actually went to a library. She'd check out books from the library and she'd check out 5 books. And then, within 2 weeks, she'd be done with those 5 books and want more. My youngest daughter wasn't so interested in reading. So my wife found some very age-appropriate books and said, okay, I'll pay you $1 to read this book. And so she said, okay, she wanted $1, so she read the book. And then after doing that for a while, she developed an interest in reading them because she realized, hey, this is cool, that, these different kinds of stories. So extrinsic motivation, we're promising something beforehand or telling them there's going to be a punishment if you don't. We're trying to control their behavior. Intrinsic motivation, people enjoy things, and we try to encourage that in some way, not by promising rewards, but sometimes just after the fact, giving a reward. Okay, the last section we have is on emotion. And since that's kind of a different topic, I'm going to continue with emotion on Friday. So that's going to pretty much conclude our lesson for today. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any answers? Anyone want to comment on whether this is working for you or not? Okay, ask if anyone has any answers. Jalen gave me an answer, 42. Don't know what that's the answer to, but there's an answer. Okay. All right, guys, thank you for being here today. Again, if you have any comments about what's working or not working, you can email me. I want you to watch the 2 videos for sure, the short one on the Dove Beauty, and then the 10-minute one on intrinsic, extrinsic motivation. Okay, love you guys. See you on Friday.
Thank you.
Welcome.